Hi everybody, happy Memorial Day and week 8. We're going to be progressing through your final project today and, well, this week, really thinking about character development, script development, and thumbnailing. So, this week you only have one discussion board since I'm asking a lot of you, and with the holiday, the beginning of the week you really want to plan out everything so that at the end of the week you can thumbnail everything. But post your work in progress, comment on at least 2 classmates' projects, make sure to comment on story, concept, composition, and presentation. This is still the early phases of our final, so you can reroute. You can change what you're kind of thinking, so feel free to comment openly and freely about suggestions. You know, like, I don't really feel for your character here. What were you thinking? Or talk about ways that you can get more showing, not telling, or how can I feel more for this dramatic moment, all that kind of stuff. So, really, here, focus only on suggestions, okay? Ways to improve. And then we're going to start thumbnailing. Try to do roughs for all of your scenes so you can see how the story evolves and the character development up and downs. Try to narrow down a genre. Really, by thumbnailing, you should have, you know, I know your script was due or your synopsis was due last week. You should really have it fleshed out. And when you're thumbnailing, you don't have to really think exactly about what your character details look like, but you do want to try to get some of those details in there, and that's why we want to do all of this pre-production first. I'm going to open this while we're doing that. And then just a look into the week ahead. We're going to progress your storyboard, get your panels digitized, clean them up, expressions, all that kind of stuff. So, what I like to do, and I highly encourage you do as well, is really pre-produce this project. I mean, storyboarding is part of the pre-production process, but when you get kind of detailed, we're going to pre-produce for our pre-production. Very crazy, right? So technically a thumbnail, they call it a thumbnail because it could be the size of your thumb. That is pretty tiny, but you know, we've talked about in the past how you can get a lot of panels on the page by doing thumbnails, and you can see how things progress really well that way. Again, technically a thumbnail, you could be like, here's character 1, here's character 2, they're exchanging whatever. And of course, you would like zoom out because this would be your tiny thumbnail. The more you put into this, the easier the next part of the process is going to be. So we talked about that, you know, last week. Keep it going moving forward. Now, if you want to just kind of rush and get the main ideas so that we can see panel to panel what things are looking like, that's fine. I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me, allergies. Allergy season in Illinois has arrived. So you can, you know, have multiple panels on this page. You can still use the previous storyboarding sheets that we have been using. I'm just looking for you to be able to see beginning to end of the entire story that you want to tell for your final. Okay, so that's why roughing it in works well. Now, if you're doing this digitally, it's a little bit easier because we can always add more layers on top of it to add detail or to change things up. If you're doing it on pencil paper, obviously you're going to have to redo everything. You can scan it in and digitize it, but for this final project, it will need to be digitally completed. We are going to do color, we are going to do lighting, and so you need to save your files, and I mean, I guess you don't have to, you could redo them, but that's silly. But this is going to be a full-fledged animatic, so help yourself out. You probably could do pencil and paper this week, but then starting next week, I would digital. Well, you're going to be required to do it digitally. Okay? So, I'm going to talk today about character sheets, pose sheets, how we can position things. So you can think if your movie or your short, whatever you want to call it, if it's going to be for a live action film, for an animation, for a game, cinematic, whatever you want it to be. But we're going to want to push the characters in the storyboard because, again, story and characters go hand in hand. They are best friends. You cannot care about one without caring about the other. It kind of ruins the film. You know, I'm trying to think of a good example, but like I read books often and sometimes big things happen to characters and you just don't care. You know, if that big thing were to happen to you, it would be devastating, but because there wasn't a lot of character development, you don't feel for the character. Or the opposite, if something like weird just happens to the character, you might care for the character, but you're like, that story, you know, it doesn't really make sense. I'm not sure what they're trying to get across there. So we really want to work story, character development. Remember, this story should be centered around a specific character. Now, it doesn't have to be a human, okay? You can do, I mean, don't steal, but like the Brave Little Toaster. You could have kitchen appliances. Again, that's copywritten, don't do that. But this can be a story about bears, aliens, plants, whatever you want it to be. If you want to do humans, that's great. What we normally start with when we're building a character, well, let me even take a step back before we get to a pose sheet. You're gonna want to really know your character. So I like to make a chart, and you know, some of it may seem silly, but getting all of their details out first is gonna be really helpful. So writing character development, what are you going to ask your characters? So this, you know, you have a character interview. So you've already written the story. You know what's going to happen to the character. But we can build and improve upon our story by knowing more about our character. Now, a lot of times people make stories or write stories based on themselves and they're actually the main character, or based on a friend or family member and they're the main character. So that's helpful. Sometimes you create things that are, you know, just out of your mind. So start by asking questions. And again, I take notes on this. I make a little chart. So it's like, Sally is 5. She's got red hair. She wears glasses. Her favorite toy is her teddy bear. She carries around a toy fry everywhere she goes. She loves pizza. Like all of these things, you may be like, what does it matter if she loves pizza, right? And maybe it doesn't matter, but there are some opportunities where these little bits and pieces can help grow your story. Maybe the main dramatic moment is at a pizza parlor or something like that. So try asking those questions. Do it early in the writing process. This says even before you start writing. You could, to kind of know your character's motivations. My guess is from last week to this week, you are going to develop your script further, so this will help you in that. You can learn a wide variety of details. This is a big one. I mean, I know this class isn't really focusing on writing for weeks, but even with creating art, if you can have something to look back on to inspire you, to make you kind of reroute or think of a different way, it's going to be very helpful. You can do this for any character. So sometimes I do a in-depth one for my main character, and generally if I'm going to have a protagonist and an antagonist, I do it for both of them. Then the supporting characters, I do a more simplified version. Now, you're going to be drawing these characters, so we do need to think a lot about their physical appearance. How do they wear their hair? What kind of clothes? Do they wear makeup? Do they consider themselves fat or skinny? What's their nationality, skin tone, face shape? This is just going to help you when it comes to actually creating. If they are blue, if they're like avatar people, then you just know what you're kind of creating. What's their face shape? Sometimes you can take, you know, like fruits and is an apple, a pear, a whatever for their face. That is also, a way that you can define their body. Questions about your character's background and lifestyle. Where were they born? Who are their parents? Where do they live? Biggest regret, any bad habits, things that you can just bring in. So maybe my main character just always bites their nails, okay? And that's a habit that you can tell when the character is nervous or the character is upset. So without having to say, Sally was starting to get scared, you can say, close up on Sally's mouth as she bites her nails. What are their interests? What about their relationships? So this is a big thing because now you're creating that supporting cast, right? I can't even think of a pinpoint example, but there's generally a best friend, right? Somebody that's going to help the character out along the way. Characters' thoughts and emotions, and again, this is to help with the writing process. You're not, do they have a romantic partner? Yes. Sally's partner, Jane, is whatever. Maybe that never comes up in your story. Okay? It's not that you have to take all these questions and fit every answer into the story. You're just fully developing a character so you can think in their shoes and how they would act and react in the story. So, why is character development important? I guess I'll go back up to this. Again, character and plot are inseparable. That's what I talked about earlier, character and story. We want to feel for these characters, and they need to feel real. If we don't feel like they could actually be living, breathing things, then we don't believe that they can go through the trauma or emotion of the story, and therefore we don't really believe in them as much. Every story is going to have a main character, which would be your hero or protagonist. Doesn't mean they're a superhero, it's just the main character, the good guy. Many stories have a bad guy and secondary characters. Help the main characters, oppose them, or be completely neutral. Just the reader needs to understand the protagonist and antagonist in deeper ways. Give the protagonist flaws. So, just like I was saying before, when we want to relate to a character or believe in them, a lot of times you don't, if everything just happens perfectly and everything your character does is just on point and look at them go, they get an A on the test, they're the prom queen, they won the softball tournament and, bases loaded and they hit it, the end. You're like, well, good for them. Everybody has flaws. We don't want to see a perfect character. So give them some flaws. Also give them an arc, okay? It's some sort of change in the character, okay? Like Spider-Man, okay? He becomes Spider-Man. He realizes he has all of these cool abilities. Then he realized the responsibility that comes along with it. So he goes from being more carefree and enjoying it to realizing the consequences of his actions. He loses a loved one. It changes his personality, his belief system, and how he is as a superhero. Give the antagonist, so we're talking about antagonist now. The antagonist is going to challenge, go against your protagonist. The motivation should create a crisis for your protagonist. Every villain needs to have their own morality, however warped. If a villain spends part of the novel killing people, you need to give him or her believable reasons for doing so. So just like we talked about the perfect character, we're not going to really feel for our antagonist if there's no reason. If we can feel for, man, now I can't even think of the example, but I was watching something the other day and I was like, man, like as much as I don't want this character to win, I really like them. That is a great antagonist because you can feel for them. Your heart goes out for them. I mean, you could think of like Snape in Harry Potter. He was made to be out this villain throughout so many of, well, I guess spoiler, no spoiler. It's been many a years. But good character change and plot. Make your antagonist powerful. Your audience wants to see the main character do what they came to do, succeed. But, again, we don't want it to just be like, and they won. The villain should be a match for your hero and even more powerful. Secondary characters. They can either be complementary or oppositional. So they can help the protagonist have, a skill set that the protagonist needs to be able to kind of fill in and complete that character. Or they can, undermine the protagonist. So their example, Dr. Watson and Sherlock Holmes. Again, think of the genre of your story too. Do you want secondary characters to add humor? Are they going to add drama? All that. Develop characters who reflect your interests. Again, write what you know. Reveal their physical world through detail. Give them the right skills. Create memorable characters. Give the reader access to their inner conflict. And subvert your reader's expectations. And then this is kind of the same thing that we talked about before, but questions to ask your main character. This is an exercise I would recommend. I'll copy these links and send them to you. This is from Judd Apatow. I thought it was interesting to see from his point of view. Character development is the process of fleshing out fully formed dynamic characters and with well-defined personality traits and a strong point of view. Character development affects everything from a character's name and physical attributes to their backstory and character bio. Whether you're writing short stories or Hollywood thriller, developing believable characters is just as important as creating a compelling storyline. How to write a believable character in 5 steps. Define your character's overarching motivation. So again, no matter what, they're not going to give up because why? What happened? Who happened? When did it happen that they decided this is what I'm going to do? Figure out your character's central conflict. Once we've established what the character's goals are, we need to build in the internal and external obstacles to that goal. Now, you could have a whole story that only revolves around your one character. Internal conflict is just as strong as external conflict. Hero, you could have man versus man, so protagonist, antagonist. Man versus himself. Man versus environment. There are a lot of different antagonists in a way that you wouldn't think. Determine how your character will change over the course of the story. Again, that story arc. Develop your character's backstory and define your character's superficial characteristics. Think about the kinds of character you're writing. Do research. Maybe one of your characters is a success-oriented business person, an anxious person battling depression, blah, blah, blah. Research those types of people. Analyze your character's psychology. As you delve into the psychology of your characters, the self-help shelf at your local bookstore can be a great resource. Stay actively engaged in the character development process. And again, that's why I write all these things down at the beginning, because you may find that as we go through this process and you're drawing your boards, you're, like 3/4 of the way digitizing your story, and then you're like, is that how my character would react? And you can go back to those notes to see what would the character do, what are they looking like, all that kind of stuff. Create backstories. Pick 3 characters from the first draft of your screenplay and analyze how to introduce them. So introductions are also a big thing. You know, opening the door and slow motion camera captures her hair blowing in the wind while slowly zooming. Or slipping with the lunch tray, throwing it in the air and spilling spaghetti all over their face. Those are two very different character introductions. Not that one is more successful for the other. They're both developing a lot about the character. So, start with the written word, getting all the information out about your characters. Then we can start drawing. So, a lot of times we start with what are called model sheets. So, a model sheet, and here are some examples of, let's just do Bugs Bunny. Model sheets, pose sheets, facial expression sheets. This is more of our model sheet. Let me look at this one to show you more what I'm talking about. Full body model sheets. You're going to want a front and a side. Most model sheets are front, side, back, and 3/4. Okay? Most of us think in a front straight-on view. So what I would recommend is you draw out your character in the front view. You must use rulers. They don't have to be evenly spaced. You could just say like right where this belt line is, where her top of her shoulders are. But then you want to go and do a side view. Again, it should match up perfectly. That's why it's nice that we kind of think in this view, because you can get this all set and then kind of edit the side view. For the back, same thing, use those ruler lines, and then 3/4, you don't have to worry about the lines because we're getting a different perspective. So it will look something like this. Front, 3/4, side, back. Okay? So, model sheets help us in a lot of ways. When you're drawing different panels, sometimes you can make it where your character changes size. You know, frame 1, they're 6 feet tall, frame 2, they're 4 feet tall, but you were just focused on the drawings and you didn't realize it. So it's a guide to help keep proportion. It can be used a lot when you're doing 2D or 3D animation and modeling. But again, this is a reference for you to always go back to. So if you have this all set, you can always pull the character right from your model sheet, copy and paste it into your storyboard, edit the positioning as you need to. So this is kind of an example that I liked here. So this is a character as a witch. The witch does not fit the contemporary version of the archetype. She's neither good nor nice, definitely not naive in any way. She's a classic fairy tale witch, evil, personified, possessive, selfish, manipulative, etc. Her beautiful and youthful appearances hides an old woman, blind and bald. She dresses like a medieval nun. Her double-pointed hat gives her a double look, sinister and satanic, like the forked tongue of a snake. Her larger eyes and wide sleeves, same silhouette, reminds the viewer of a praying mantis. So a lot of additional research into making this character. So they started with a close-up of the face. You can do this, but generally I do the full body first and then look at the face. So full head turnaround, which again is the same front, 3/4, side, and back. Then the full body. Color sheet is a way to just kind of, again, like you were doing the mood board and the color boards, getting a specific sheet only for this main character. Then we go into expression sheets. Expression is huge. If you just have your character in every panel looking the same way, you're not going to sell your story as well. I'm not going to get the idea that she's sad just because you say, oh, character says I'm sad, right? If you, here, let me All right, so if I have just, I'm sorry for my light, if I have just a straight on view of the face and I'm saying she's sad, maybe I have the frown. Okay, but when we're looking at those boards and we're trying to tell our story, if we get the shoulders, her head is down, you know, maybe it's tipped to the side so the camera can really see it. She's got the expression, the sadness going on. That is going to sell it a lot more. So you want to think about all of these exaggerated emotions. So generally we could do like excited, terrified, sad, happy. Think about big emotion words, angry. So then you can really think, like looking in here, the eyebrows, huge tells for emotion, angry, sad, excited or scared, they're going to pop up. Think about how open the eyes are. If somebody's really tired, their eyelid is going to droop into where their pupil is. If they're excited or, you know, I just drank 10 cups of coffee, their eyes are going to be huge. Thinking even about just positioning. If I'm happy or, you know, like, is my head going to be tipped up, sad, tipped down? So then you can see this expression sheet for the face. And then we go into a pose sheet, which allows you to think of the main poses that your character would be doing throughout your story. Now, when we're looking at pose sheets, I'm kind of jumping all around here, but pose sheets, again, knowing what your story is and kind of drawing out how your character would go through the emotions. So if like this character's sitting down when she's kind of frustrated and angry versus this one where she might just be bored, you can tell that she's quirky and silly from these poses, and you haven't even, you know, read the story. We want to think a lot, though, about line of action, which is, again, that line from kind of the top of your head down the middle of your body, your spine. How are we holding our body? A straight line is less exciting than a curved line. So if I put my hip out, something like that, you're going to get more dynamic positioning from that. And with that line of action, we can actually just look at a silhouette of the character to see if it's successful. So again, if I'm frustrated or in thought, if I do this and it's a straight on view from the camera, that's fine, but you can't actually see anything, because if I were to look at this position in a silhouette, my hand is on top of my face, which is on top of my body, my arm. If I turn slightly and now I'm looking up, you can see a triangle here of space. You can actually see the profile of my face. You can see the hand. It just shows the emotion a lot more. So see how all of this is kind of tight. You can really see the details in the best. Now, obviously, these are different characters, so, but a lot of times you want to look at silhouette in terms of shape and form, what your character actually looks like, but then you want to look at it for dynamics in the actual character posing. You know, we look at this silhouette, you know exactly who it is, right? We can see 2 hands, 2 feet, 2 ears. The nose, see, we're getting even more dynamic here than this one because the nose is missing in this one. So you want to really think about the types of silhouette, the type of positioning that your characters are doing when you make a pose sheet. All right, so posing your characters, keeping them appealing and readable. So the easiest way to judge if your character pose is working is look at the silhouette. So we can see we can't really tell what's going on here. We can easily tell he's drinking a glass of water there. Thinking about rhythm and how we position ourselves. Twinning is when one side of the body moves at the same time or looks the same as the other side. You want to think about different negative spaces and the angles of the body. So it's a big task that you're doing because you're thinking about camera angles, lighting, color, character design, and now the positioning of the character on the page. But, I mean, 1, you can do it, and 2, that's bringing together all of the information that you've been learning so far. Use contrast. So here's this line of action on a straight angle, straight line, straight line. So now we're adding bend throughout it. thinking about the flow, the curves that things are making, and how breaking, if you guys are into animation and stuff like that, what would break the rig, thinking about using folds, tangents where things meet up. That's not as important for what we're doing, but just so you know. All right, so we have our facial and body expression sheets. Here are just some more examples. Just interesting to see it in different styles. Exaggerate, have fun. All right. So just some character design tips. This is Create a Blog again. Don't lose the magic. Again, when you start with something, maybe you drew out this really cool model sheet, but as you're drawing it in the storyboard, you're kind of losing some of the details, some of the pizzazz. It takes time. Just don't lose the magic. Step away from reference material. So look at your inspirations, but then step away. Research other characters that are similar to your own, but also look at other characters. Think about, what do you like to look at? What characters are your favorite? Don't lose sight of your original idea. Exaggerate. This is probably one of my favorites. If you've got a real brainy character, their head could be larger, adorable, big eyes kind of thing. Decide who your character design is aimed at. Target audience, always important. So I want you guys to think, you thought about that last week a bit, but make sure you're still following that. Make your character distinctive. Create clear silhouettes. Develop a line of action. So again, thinking about that line that goes from the top of the head down the spine to the toes. Make it personal. Find posture first. So again, think about how your character would walk, talk, stand. That's why we do the pose sheets and emotion sheets. Consider your line quality. Use a joke structure. Keep it simple. Consider all of the angles, aka that's why you're doing your sheets. Now, let me also clarify. I am not grading model sheets or anything like that. Again, I do highly encourage you to do them, but it's only going to help you out, so that is on you. We're just looking at the thumbnails for this week. Choose colors carefully. Don't forget the hair. Add accessories. Focus on facial expression. Again, that all comes down to the camera work. Is it important that we have a close-up on the face here? Do we need to see this crazy body pose? Give your character goals. Build up a backstory. Make your character design flexible. Get feedback from others. So we have discussion boards all the time, but feel free to show it to your friends and family. A lot of times I find that non-artists can sometimes give me the best feedback. Make it honest. Create the right environment. Fine-tune your figure. Don't be afraid to make changes. And I'll post this again in the announcement, but I just wanted you to, just some last bullet points to take away. Then just interesting characters. So like even a human, we don't have to keep the proportion. They do need to function. So I always go back to this similar example. If you have this humongous axe or weapon or whatever it is, and your main character has to be able to hold it, use it, whatever, that needs to go into their design. Because if you give a character like tiny T-Rex arms, they can't do that. So if you have a character that needs to run and they don't have legs, obviously they could fly or whatever, but you need to think about those details. Style and aesthetic. Personality, of course. And thinking, how can we give this personality visually? And then the details. All right. So big look at storytelling, character, and thumbnailing this week. I hope you have a wonderful week, and let me know if you have any questions.